What I am tracking right now across the United States is a weather pattern that has expanded well beyond what the models were showing even 48 hours ago. And the data coming in this morning is making it increasingly clear that this situation is going to affect far more people across far more states and over a far longer period of time than what was initially anticipated. We are looking at a multi-phase winter weather event that will touch somewhere in the range of 150 to 200 million people across the central, southern, and eastern United States over the coming days, with impacts that will not simply end when the precipitation stops. Snow and ice will overlap in the most dangerous ways across the southern tier of the country, and the duration of those impacts, particularly in areas where freezing rain accumulations are expected to exceed 3/4 of an inch, is going to stretch well into next week. What I am describing is not one storm, it is a pattern shift. And that distinction matters enormously for how you prepare and how long you stay prepared. To understand why this event is so significant, you have to start at the large scale. The atmospheric pattern across North America has been undergoing a fundamental reorganization over the past 10 to 14 days. A deep, persistent upper-level trough is now establishing itself across the central part of the continent, reinforced from the north by an unusually strong polar vortex displacement event. This is not a brief intrusion of cold air that retreats after a day or two. The cold air mass building across Canada and spilling south into the northern plains is being sustained by a pattern that shows no meaningful warm air return for at least 10 to 14 days. That is a critical detail that separates this event from a typical late-season cold snap. When I look at the 500 millibar charts and the surface temperature anomaly data together, what I am seeing is a situation where the cold air has both the depth and the staying power to support multiple rounds of significant winter weather. The storm track is remaining favorably positioned for moisture to tap into both the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific simultaneously, and that dual moisture feed is what gives this pattern its unusual breadth and persistence. A strong surface high pressure anchoring itself across Western Canada is going to act as a continuous driver, pushing cold air southward through the plains corridor, while low pressure energy consolidating along the Gulf Coast will serve as the focus for precipitation development. That interaction is what creates the sharp temperature gradients defining where snow transitions to sleet and freezing rain. And in this setup, that transition zone sits squarely over some of the most densely populated and least winter-prepared regions of the country. Confidence in the overall pattern is high. The timing and precise positioning of individual precipitation bands still carries meaningful uncertainty, and I will flag those areas specifically as I walk through the timeline. The first significant system in this sequence is already developing, and I want to walk through it carefully because it is going to set the stage for everything that follows. Moisture is currently streaming northward out of the Gulf and interacting with the cold air mass that has dropped into the northern plains and upper Midwest, producing a developing area of low pressure that is deepening more rapidly than the models were suggesting 24 hours ago. That rapid deepening is the first sign that this event is going to perform toward the higher end of current projections. Across the northern plains, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and into southern Minnesota, heavy snow is already beginning to develop this afternoon, with rates increasing through the evening hours to 1 to 2 inches per hour across portions of central and eastern South Dakota, extending into southwestern Minnesota and northwestern Iowa. Cities like Sioux Falls, Rapid City, and Aberdeen are going to be dealing with significant accumulation, and the combination of snowfall rates and wind is going to produce blowing and drifting snow that will make travel extremely difficult, likely impassable in some rural corridors, through tonight and into tomorrow morning. I-90 through South Dakota and southern Minnesota, I-80 across Nebraska and Iowa, and I-94 through Wisconsin are all going to see extended periods of hazardous or impassable conditions. This is not a situation where road crews can stay ahead of accumulation rates of 2 inches per hour with wind-driven drifting. Moving east into the Great Lakes region, the setup is increasingly concerning. Lake effect enhancement is going to push totals in some locations well above what synoptic snow totals alone would suggest. Chicago is currently in a zone where the final track of the low will determine whether the city ends up on the higher or lower end of projections. I am not ready to lock in a specific number there yet. Detroit and the surrounding metro are looking at 8 to 14 inches. Grand Rapids is one area I think could overperform. The lake effect component there is not yet fully captured in the deterministic models, and localized totals approaching 18 to 20 inches in terrain just east of Lake Michigan are possible. Behind the storm, temperatures are going to drop sharply, meaning any snow that has not been cleared will compact and freeze into a durable surface hazard that persists for days. That post-storm refreezing is something I want people across the Midwest to plan for specifically, because it extends the travel hazard window well beyond the period of active precipitation. While the first system is still producing snow across the Midwest and Great Lakes, a separate and initially independent area of energy is developing across the Rockies and the Intermountain West. This is the piece of this forecast that carries the most uncertainty at this stage, but also the most potential for significant impact across a very wide area. A shortwave trough dropping out of the Pacific and diving into the base of the mean trough across the central Rockies is going to interact with Gulf moisture in a way that produces a second major winter storm system, consolidating and intensifying as it moves east across the Central Plains during the mid to late portion of this week. The Rockies themselves will see heavy mountain snow first, with passes across Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah likely seeing 2 to 3 feet in the highest terrain. I-70 through the Colorado Mountains, I-80 through Wyoming, and I-84 through Oregon and Idaho are all going to see extended closure risk as this system develops. For residents along the Front Range, Denver, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and Cheyenne, the timing of the transition from mountain snow to plains snow is still being refined, but the current signal is for a significant snowfall event beginning Wednesday night and continuing through Thursday. As this system moves east, it is going to tap into the same Gulf moisture stream that has been feeding the first storm, and that is where the potential for large snowfall totals across the Central Plains becomes significant. Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and southern Iowa are all in the zone where accumulations of 8 to 16 inches are possible across a fairly wide swath. Wichita, Kansas City, Tulsa, and Oklahoma City are all cities I am watching closely for this second event. The exact track of the low center is going to determine which areas end up on the heavier northwest side of the precipitation shield versus the lighter southeastern side, and that track uncertainty is real. I am not going to lock in city-specific totals for this system yet. What I am confident about is that the large-scale environment supports a significant event, and that confidence is growing with each successive model run. The eastern progression of this system through the Ohio Valley and toward the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast is going to be critical for the second half of the week. If this system tracks as currently indicated, areas from Cincinnati and Columbus east through Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and into southern New England could be looking at another round of heavy snow on top of whatever the first system deposited. There is still room for this forecast to shift, and I will be updating totals and timing as the system approaches. I need to address the severe weather component of this pattern, which is easy to overlook when the focus is on snow and ice. Along the warm side of the primary storm system, the interaction between the advancing cold air and the warm, moist air streaming north out of the Gulf is going to create conditions favorable for severe thunderstorms, and in the right mesoscale environment, tornadoes. The Ohio Valley is the region I am most concerned about. Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, and potentially West Virginia are all within the area where a corridor of supercell-capable storms could develop. This is not yet a high-confidence severe weather event, and I want to be clear about that. What I am tracking is a scenario in which a corridor roughly 200 to 300 miles wide could see a 6 to 12-hour window during which shear, instability, moisture, and a well-defined surface boundary are simultaneously present. The cold air advancing from the northwest and the warm, moist air flowing in from the southeast are going to produce a sharp frontal boundary, and it is along and just ahead of that boundary where the severe weather risk will be focused. I am flagging this now because the northern tier of a classic winter storm setup is not where people typically think about tornado risk, and I do not want that risk to go unacknowledged. Confidence in this portion of the forecast is still increasing, and I will have more specific probability information as the setup matures. Beginning today through tonight, the primary impact zone is the northern plains and upper Midwest. Tonight through tomorrow morning, the Great Lakes region sees the heaviest accumulations from the first system, with lake effect enhancement pushing totals higher in favored locations downwind of the lakes. Tomorrow afternoon through Thursday, attention shifts to the Rockies and the developing second system, with heavy mountain snow transitioning to plains snow across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri by Wednesday night. The Thursday through Friday window is when this second system will be at peak intensity across the Central Plains and Ohio Valley. And that is also the window during which the severe weather risk is highest. Friday night through Saturday, the second system begins to affect the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, with heavy snow possible from Washington, D.C. northward through Philadelphia, New York City, Hartford, and Boston. The states carrying the highest cumulative impact risk across both systems include North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Colorado, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. The back-to-back nature of these two systems, with insufficient recovery time between them, is what elevates the overall risk level beyond what either individual storm would represent in isolation. Power outage risk is highest where freezing rain accumulations exceed a ½ inch, covering portions of Tennessee, Kentucky, the Western Carolinas, northern Mississippi, and the lower Ohio Valley. In areas where accumulations exceed 3/4 of an inch of ice, outage durations could extend to a week or longer in the most isolated locations, and repair crews are going to face extended and difficult working conditions given the sub-freezing temperatures that will persist for days after the precipitation ends. This is a serious and evolving weather situation across a very large portion of the United States. The combination of back-to-back systems, persistent cold between and after those systems, and the severe weather component across the Ohio Valley makes this one of the more complex multi-hazard winter forecasts I have tracked in recent years. Preparation time is limited, particularly for the second system, which is still several days out but closing fast. Make sure you are monitoring local forecasts closely, have emergency supplies in place, and are checking on people in your area who may be vulnerable to extended cold or power loss. I will have updated information as the pattern continues to evolve. Thank you for following this coverage and stay with us for continued updates.